Okay, part two, integrating this no self realization. Before I continue on, so we left off, I caught the ego laying claim to this, and mind went crazy. But before I talk about all that, let me just kind of interject here. I'm going to be speaking to realizations regarding the Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost. And I want to explain where that's. Bernadette Robert talks about it in her book, No Self Experience. And she talks about when you get to know self, that it involves the, what is the word? Vanishing, the destroying of the Trinity. Something like that. And I totally get it. And she's totally right. But I also had this revelation, this download that, how do I say this quickly? It has to do with our heart chakra, the levels or the stages of awakening. So there's 7 levels of consciousness, but we are concerned with 4 through 7 because that's waking and enlightenment and all the way up to enlightenment. And what I realized is the stages 4 through 7, those 4 stages, 4 stages have to do with the awakening of the heart chakra. There's 12 petals of the heart chakra. And within each stage, level of consciousness, there are 3, the Holy Trinity comes in, 3 levels of perception that we are working in or waking into or dealing with. I know I'm not making any sense because this download is new and I don't quite have the words to describe this knowing that I have inside of me. But what I realized is the Holy Trinity plays a role in each level of all 4 stages of consciousness. And it has to do with, at each stage, has to do with awakening the heart, how we perceive and interact with self, man, Christ, the other, and God, and our perception and interaction with each one of those. So at each level, we awaken the heart, right? So each time we awaken to a new level of consciousness, we go through these 3 different interactions or integrations: self, other, God. And this is also why it seems like the same stuff keeps coming up over and over again. Like, you go through my videos and I'm talking about the same burning away of this and burning away of that, but it's because at each level the same stuff is going to come up, same anger, the same sadness, the same images, identifications, attachments come up, but they have to be burned away, and they're being burned away from a whole new level of perception. So there you go. and I probably appear to be more suffering, although I probably don't show you as the level of suffering or integration that I really have been experiencing. I have to admit that I have a not so savvy psycho-emotional vehicle that I'm working with. So I have a lot of shit to clean up. So there's a lot more for me to deal with, and I don't do it in a savvy way because I have kind of an emotional immaturity level in my psyche. Anyway, and also, I am never satisfied, and I keep asking for more. I keep asking to keep burning and burning away because I'm not going to be satisfied until, if it's possible, to be totally cleaned out, if that's possible. Anyway, so if it seems like I'm always suffering and always going through stuff, it's because I keep asking for more. Because I know there's more. I can see it. I can see so clearly all my identifications and images and ego stuff. It's crazy. Anyway, so back to my journey. Ego, mind was going crazy. After I saw it, it started going crazy. And during this time, my sense of self was nothing. I was feeling nothing. Nothing. I could feel nothing. Total, this emptiness, this void. And that's a terrible experience, to feel absolutely nothing, like there's an emptiness and a void inside of you. And I mean feeling nothing for anybody, for nothing. It's a terrible feeling. So mine was going crazy. And I couldn't detach myself from the mind. I was like buying into it. So I just was like doing activities, hoping, and it does, mind will wear itself out. And I was miserable, absolutely angry, all this, just angry. And there's a reason for all this. I'll talk about it. But I want to tell you a little kind of near-death experience kind of happened. So mine was going crazy. So I decided I'm going to clean out the garage. And I'm like, you know how you're in the groove and you're doing stuff, and you're not thinking about anything. And so I had to go from the garage out into the backyard to get something. And I am just trotting away, just totally kind of not unconscious, but not thinking about anything, just working on my stuff in the zone. And suddenly I stopped in my tracks, like something just hit me. And from the depths of my soul came up, and I was just like, I cannot live without God in my life. I need God. Like, it just came up. And as quickly as it came up, it went away, and I started walking, right back walking, and I was going to my shed. And then suddenly I stopped. It was like a simultaneous slow motion thing. I was stopped in my tracks. I heard a huge crack, and this huge pecan tree branch like went right in front of my face. I mean, literally the big part of it passed right in front of me, right in front of my feet, and landed right in front of me. Like I would have tripped over it if I would have taken another step. And I was in shock. I mean, there was some divine intervention and a message, right? Because what stopped me earlier? Now, if you have what I've learned from that experience, I had a friend who studies Rudolf Steiner. She's like a Rudolf Steiner expert. And he says that those types of experiences, so if you have something like this happen to you, they are always considered initiation moments, that you're moving into, it's the next phase of initiation. And it truly felt that way. But wow, what stopped me? What made that inner calling? And then to be stopped so that I wouldn't be hit by that very large tree branch. Of course, it wouldn't have killed me, but it would have definitely knocked me out, I'll tell you that. Okay, so a new level of initiation was happening. Okay, had to pause there because I lost my train of thought. Because there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's hard for me to articulate and express all that this is encompassing. And because this is still new for me, so I haven't had enough space in between all of these experiences to know how to express them. So forgive me if I'm all over the place. So this is where we're going to speak about this, how the Holy Trinity fits into this stages of integration. And at no self or Brahman, awareness, awakening, this is where the Holy Trinity, God, self, and Christ all go away. And this is what I mean. And at this point, my awareness, I was feeling it still up here. Okay. So I'm going to read, and I'm going to read from the book where she speaks about the Trinity. One by one, the Trinity vanished. First came the loss of self, the vessel and the medium. So the loss of self happened for me when in the car and the other previous awakenings where I realized there's no one here. There's really no one here. Okay? That's a loss of self. And that awareness lands here. And you'll hear this in other teachers speak, not that I'm a teacher, teachers speak to the fact that there's always an integration, 3 integration points, whether you're awakening in consciousness or awareness, that it comes head, heart, gut. And awareness now, for me, has been moving down. So it was the loss of self, the vessel. Awareness was here. And the next point of dissolution, let's see. First came the loss of self, the vessel, the medium. Sorry, I lost my place. One by one, the Trinity. First came the loss of self, Christ. Next came the loss of God within, or the still point. This happened for me, an experience, and these all happened really one right after the other. I was in my kitchen and I was sweeping, and I was listening to an interview, and something they said on there triggered something in me. And I looked up, and I think the person in the interview was saying, and God saw me, or something like that. And I looked up, and suddenly this space was looking back at me. And it was several levels of perception at once. It was God looking at me, looking at itself within me, the space seeing the space within me. It was also the space seeing the vessel. It was simultaneous subject object awareness and no object seeing itself within me. It was crazy. I'm not explaining this well, but it was as if God saw itself within me and saw me all at the same time. I was seen. And this wasn't simply a mind game, because suddenly then my heart kind of exploded. And I'll tell you what it healed within me. It healed most, 99%, maybe 98% of all of my physical awareness issues, like, whether I look good or not, my self-esteem, how, my physical body, all the worries, am I good enough? Am I pretty enough? All that baloney just went poof, because I saw and experienced, it was almost like joy. That awareness saw itself in me as me, and it was happy. And so it kind of opened my heart. And so it wasn't just a mind game, I'm telling you, because I felt my heart spinning. And it was so weird. I went to go reach for water and I missed the water. So and then my legs got really heavy. It was as if my consciousness was out there. And so this energy welling up inside of me lasted for about an hour. And it was just amazing. And a couple of days later, if not that same day, I realized awareness had dropped to my heart. And what happened was, what vanished within the Trinity was, first came the loss of self, the vessel and the medium, Christ. Next came the loss of God within, or the still point. And what I can say is, I can no longer find a still point. There's no point I can find within me. I understand what she's saying completely. I don't know if I can convey it to you, but I can't go to, you know how you can go to your still point within? I can't do that anymore. So that diminished. Next came the loss of God within me. The still point is gone. Okay, this is the breaking down of the Trinity. Holy Spirit. And finally, the loss of God without, the transcendent Father or I seeing itself. Now, I may have confused, this is all new to me, but I may have confused, but God saw itself within me, so God also died. God died. God is dead for me. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, but I realized all the revelations that came from all three of these kind of awakenings, because then awareness slipped all the way down into my belly. I don't know how that happened. I don't really know what's going on. But what I feel is God is dead. And what I mean by that is, I realized, and she also speaks to that, that this entire spiritual journey, this seeking God, every experience of God or the divine that I've ever had has come from my own soul, from me, the little self, the causal body, which is also considered the little self. Or it's the higher self, but it's still a self. And when you awaken into no self, it breaks down everything, and you realize that there never was really a God experience. It was you creating it this whole time. Not that any of it was bad or wrong or false, but that God that you, God or the divine or energy, whatever you want to call it, is not what you think. God is, well, you can't explain it, but okay, it's space, it's silence, it has no qualities to it. And what happened, so the Trinity is kind of gone. God is dead for me. And, you know, the ego is saying that. But what that has stirred up in me is, I realized, sorry, I don't want to get emotional. And I'm saying this because I want you to look at why you're on the spiritual journey and how much you have invested in this journey. Because I've realized from how much I have invested my entire life from childhood. I want to be on this journey. I want to better myself. I want to be this blah, blah, blah. I want to be with God. The whole journey died for me. God died. And how my entire egoic structure was invested on once being awake, there will be this peaceful, joyful, God communication, communing. Everything will be beautiful. And I put all my eggs in this basket. I invested everything in it. And there's a huge identification ego structure that was relying on me finding God and being this great, wonderful person and having a much better life and finding happiness. And I'm here to tell you it doesn't happen. If you have a shitty life, now, let me back up. See, ego is still in the thralls. I'm still having to let go of this persona, this idea, this false belief. So it's still very raw in me. Of course things get better because there's truth inside of me. But the ego structure that invested its entire life in this journey to realize there was never really any God, or the one that it envisioned, and nothing really changes after awakening. I'm sure lots of stuff changes after enlightenment, but awakening, not so much. It is having a really tough time dealing with it. So there's a lot of stuff coming up for me. But yes, of course, there's this level of certainty and truth in my core, but it's not easily accessible to me at this time because this huge construct is like covering me up completely, almost like Cousin It on the Addams Family, wears the hair over the face. This structure is so large and I'm chipping away at it. It's going to fall away, but it's still clinging. It's still pissed. It is still hugely pissed that it's covering me up completely. But anyway, that's what happens when you hit that solar plexus point. Awareness hits that. It's going to stir up like your deepest desires and deepest identifications and attachments. So you're on this spiritual journey. Think about now how much you have invested, about you think your life's going to get better, or something's going to be different. Well, awakening in, let me back up a little. Awakening into consciousness, there is a level of bliss and spiritual experiences still happen because there's a you, there's a causal body, there's a you still being, what is the word? Having constructs of God and an individual soul having experiences. So at that level of awakening, I would say, yes, there is a level of bliss and your life seems better, and you have maybe ego has desires, helping, healing, phenomena is happening. But in no self, at this stage, there are little experiences, no more experiences of God, so to speak. It's totally different. It's totally different. Yeah. So anyway, I know I've rambled on. I'm so sorry. This has been really intense for me. There's, on the surface, I think I appear okay, but there's a huge ego death happening on the inside, and it's definitely akin to the grieving process. There's this anger from the ego and depression because it's thinking, it's going to die, or it's thinking, now what? I've invested my entire life into this journey for this. That's what the ego is saying, right? So this is a really tough thing, but I know it will pass. The phoenix is going to rise. But it's not so pleasant at the moment. I guess that's all. I'll end it there. Maybe I'll make a video with a happier tone to it. All right. Thanks for listening.